This is a special video to me. Special because it's a personal recommendation from Michael Silverblatt, with whom I've had the pleasure of corresponding over the last few months. I hope you enjoy it. It is possible to make the world new, said Fritz, or rather, to restore it to what it once was, for the Golden Age was certainly once a reality. Hey everybody, thank you for watching Leaf by Leaf. Today I'm talking about Penelope Fitzgerald's The Blue Flower. Penelope Fitzgerald was a British writer, and she wrote this when she was 80 years old. It is about the life of Friedrich von Hardenberg, who would more famously be remembered as Novalis. He took that pen name. It was an ancient family name that meant clearer of new lands. Novalis is grouped in with the early German Romantics. He was alive in the age of Goethe, Heine, Schiller, Schlegel, and others. He was a student of Fichte's for a while, and he has been called the most mystical of the Romantics. And this is certainly true. Penelope Fitzgerald has given us a novelization of his life from just before going to college until the death of his beloved Sophie von Kuhn. Novalis's life, his short life, I should say, he only lived to 29 years old, probably dying of tuberculosis, just like many of those in his family, as well as his beloved Sophie, whom he called my philosophy. His life mirrors that of others such as Keats and Dante, especially in terms of his love and the tragic love with Beatrice. But it was almost as if he is one of these mystical romantics who is born with so much fire burning inside of them that it's like a light bulb right before it goes out. It burns at its brightest, but only for a very short time. I was reminded of Rimbaud, especially James Ramsey Ullman's book, The Day on Fire. I remember being so excited about reading this book of Rimbaud's life because I think I first read of it or came to know of it through Annie Dillard's Wholly the Firm. She talked about how she brought this book, among others, with her and just got lost in it. And I will say that the first 200 pages are a novelization of what we know of Rimbaud's life and everything that went on with Verlaine and so on. But then it's sort of weighted down by 400 pages of the prose equivalent to doggerel, in my opinion. It may appeal to some people. Ullman makes it clear that he is just imagining what may have happened when Rimbaud went off and went to the desert and so on. But it's very redundant, really dry, pun, I guess, intended there. But the first 200 pages of this about Rimbaud are incredible. And what Fitzgerald does, unlike Ullman, is she keeps her book very trim. It's only about 280 pages, and it reads very, very smoothly. In fact, the way that Fitzgerald writes, it's just crisp and unassuming. It's got this confident humor and charm, but everything is structured with these really short, it's like 55 very short chapters, but the way it's written, it glides along. I mean, you can soar through this thing. You have to really kind of pump the brakes to make it last and to dig in. But I was thinking about this when I finished it because I just felt that it felt like something just happened so quickly to me. It sort of does mirror this life that I'm talking about, this very intensely lived life. Novalis, he believed in a return of the Golden Age. He believed that we can become immortal. He believed in a harmonization of mathematics and philosophy and poetry. He believed that poetry is the closest we can get to nature. It's nature's music. He believed in the night as this sort of divine force and something that we need to press into. In fact, What he is most famous for, as far as his writing, is Hymns to the Night and his spiritual songs. These are two early pieces that he did manage to get together, and especially with the help of the Schlegels at the time, they helped bring it into print. And these are beautiful, beautiful passages. We get things like light, capital L, to the light a season was set, but everlasting and boundless is the dominion of the night. And if we think about that from many cosmic accounts, the night was before even light was created. Even though in some accounts night is also a created thing, it gets at this boundlessness of night and how it's not something to be feared, but something to be pressed into. And this also presages what's called darkness mysticism or even negative theology. Blue, the blue flower, this title is taken from a symbol that Novalis put into one of his works. In the novel, we find him writing the blue flower. This is something that he never did finish in his lifetime, but this for him, this was a symbol of yearning. Blue in itself was a symbol of melancholy and yearning and longing. And the blue flower was something immortal, something to be longed for and sought after. In Hymns to the Night, in the third hymn, he says, "And it clung to the fleeting, extinguished life with an endless longing. Then out of the blue distances, from the hills of my ancient bliss, came a shiver of twilight, and at once snapped the bond of birth, the chains of light. I live all the daytime in faith and in might, and in holy rapture I die every night. To our old home we have to go, that blessed time again to know what yet doth hinder our return." And this is a big thing of Novalis, is what is it that's blocking us from this return to paradise, this return to the golden age? And like many romantics, he feels that infinity or the infinite and immortality is within us. This edition of Hymns to the Night and Spiritual Songs is from Crescent Moon Publishing. It's a very adequately made publication. I just recently got this just so that I would have something to read from. For a long time, I have been reading here and there Novalis online. Most of his stuff is available through Gutenberg and other online resources. And ever since the first thing I ever read, the first quote I ever read of his was, "Poetry heals the wounds inflicted by reason." And I've loved that for a long time. That was sort of my entryway. Now, it can sound like he means that, poetry above everything, and we reject anything that has to do with reason. But he was a philosopher poet, and he also said such things as that algebra can heal pain just as well as laudanum and things like that too. So I'm very happy to now have read Fitzgerald's book because it rounds out the character and the person of Novalis. Archipelago Books also has a Novalis publication, The Novices of Sais, with illustrations by Paul Klee. This reads very much like a manifesto. It's sometimes billed as a novel. I'm only about halfway through it. I had never read it before. Again, it talks much about there's the golden age to recover. We must become immortal. It talks very much about nature and poetry. But this was apparently a text that was heralded by the surrealists and quoted often from them. It opens right up with talking about basically what we would come to know as fractals in nature. He was keenly aware of them and their mathematical properties. He talks about he who speaks true is full of eternal life. His written word seems wondrously akin to the mysteries, for it is a chord taken from the symphony of the universe. So again, there's this quest for truth and beauty, and through aesthetics, but this meditation on the likenesses and affinities between mathematics and music and poetry and nature is very much an occupation of Novalis. So those are just some pointers about the enigma. Like I said, Fitzgerald gives us something that is akin to what Ullman gave us for Rimbaud. We have this beautifully written novelization of the life and character and the main points that went on during his life. Like I said, he was born into German nobility. He was born into an ancient family in good standing. His father was high up in the salt mining and minerals and things like this, which would play a key part in Novalis's life. Novalis would be sent to 3 different universities. As Fitzgerald says, this was the German way of educating your sons, to send them to a bunch of different universities to gather up as much as they could. And he was sent to study law, and he ended up studying philosophy and poetry and history. These are the things that interested him. And there's a nice anecdote of being in Fichte's classroom and how Fichte's correcting Kant in the area of epistemology. Schiller features in here. Goethe has his time in the novel. But there's a lot about the shortness of life in here. This is toward the end of the 18th century. Like I said, tuberculosis is taking many lives. It's a very hard-lived and short life for many people. For women especially, Fritz, as Novalis is called in here, Fritz is one of something like 11 or maybe 12. He's the oldest of 12 children, and mothers are, they're giving birth by the time they're 20, and sometimes they don't even make it through the birthing process. And it's a different way of life than we know now, for sure. But anyhow, Novalis has gone off. He's studying at Jena. He eventually becomes part of the Jena Circle. He's studying at Wittenberg. But on a chance visit, he meets or comes into contact with Sophie von Kuhn, who is 12 at the time, where he's something like 22. And then she is not in any way of the nobility. His little brother Erasmus goes and sees for himself who this girl is that's really caught his Fritz's attention, and finds that she's basically dumb, as he says, and that she's empty-headed and doesn't really know anything. Basically, she's way, way outside of the type of person that Fritz is supposed to marry. And so they carry on with an engagement in secret, basically, and he hides it from his father and mother. But then eventually he ends up devoting his life to being a director in the salt mining business, taken over from his family, so that he can make money and try his utmost to help his Sophie through this illness, through this tuberculosis. But of course, she doesn't make it. And this has a terrible and long-lasting, a deep effect on Novalis. He believed, of course, that in a way Sophie was his blue flower in his quest for love and connection. She was the goal. She was the result. Like I said, it starts out early on. He was born into a family with a very pious family with Moravian roots, and early on, Fritz is turned away by his instructor as part of this Moravian academic organization, and they explain that Fritz perpetually asked questions but was unwilling to receive answers. And we see, from very early on that Fritz is precocious, he's enigmatic. Fitzgerald does a great job of spacing out all these little enigmatic quips instead of bunching them all together. And she never gets super deep into his philosophies or his ideas. She gives us glances at them. So again, the brevity of life is brought into the prose, but it's done so well. For example, we still get this glimpse of a very intriguing character in life. Fritz tried to explain that he had seen not their everyday, but their spiritual selves. He could not tell when these transfigurations would come to him. When the moment came, it was as the whole world would be when body at last became subservient to soul. All human knowledge is one. Mathematics is the linking principle, just as Ritter told me that electricity is the link between body and mind. Mathematics is human reason itself in a form everyone can recognize. Why should poetry, reason, and religion not be higher forms of mathematics? All that is needed is a grammar of their common language. And if all knowledge was to be expressed through symbols, then he must set to work to write down every possible way the operation could be performed. And that is exactly what Novalis saw as his duty in life. This is a professor at Jena talking about Novalis. For him, there is no real barrier between the unseen and the seen. The whole of existence dissolves itself into myth. Every day the world was drawing nearer to infinity. The universe, after all, is within us. Although God created the world, it has no real existence until we apprehend it. Courage makes us dreamers. Courage makes us poets. So why write a novel on the very short life of Novalis? Well, Fitzgerald has chosen a wonderful epigram for the start of her novel, which she took directly from Novalis himself. And it says, "Novels arise out of the shortcomings of history." I hope you'll check out The Blue Flower by Penelope Fitzgerald. I hope I've given you enough material to interest you in the life and thinking of Novalis if you weren't already acquainted. He sometimes gets overshadowed by others, Heine and Schiller and Goethe, and of course other philosophers, Fichte of the time. But Novalis is very interesting, and there's a lot of material out there. But turn to Penelope Fitzgerald to get a perfectly balanced and crafted imagining of his brief, intense, and ultimately poignant life.